Hello, welcome to this talk on anti-oppression mindsets for collaborative design. I'm CAREY, a PhD researcher in the School of Design at Carnegie Mellon University. And if you want to tweet about this or start a conversation with me, I'm Hilary Desres, not another last name, just short for design research, on Twitter and Instagram. It is remarkable how much the world has changed since I submitted this paper in January. At that time, most of my colleagues at school and in industry were prioritizing environmental justice as the most urgent and therefore most important issue to investigate. I felt like a little bit of an outlier for studying social justice in a design school. Although there are many designers and technologists who do amazing work in this area, it has felt like a niche. So I want to begin with a thank you to the Black Lives Matter movement and the critical race theorists and justice advocates before them who put into place the foundation for collective action during this most recent recognition of police violence and historical structures of oppression. The groundwork of so many committed individuals has now positioned racial inequity as the urgent and pressing issue. In my opinion, the field of design has been slow to engage social justice, preferring to focus mainly on ecological issues, and framing the climate crisis as more urgent and not interconnected with social oppression. But as our eyes are opening within our institutions this year, racial justice is very present in the lived experiences of many people, and it deserves our creative attention. This paper reflects on my ongoing, deliberate work to recognize the necessary anti-racist mindsets and techniques that I did not learn in traditional design practice. Anti-oppression, I believe, should be part of our education for two key reasons. As problem solvers, it helps us to have a more complete picture of the context that we're working within. And as interviewers, observers, and facilitators, it is so important that we reduce the harm we might commit in those situations if we're ignorant of structural contexts. This paper reflects my positionality as a white woman who has developed an expertise in design. I have worked as a professional design researcher in industry for 15 years, particularly in the tech sector in California. I spent a few years with the design firm IDEO, and I have run my own consulting firm, Winnow Research, for the past 8 years. Because of that type of expertise, I have been invited into diverse spaces as a creative problem solver, and I love it. But I was naive for much of that time. Through learning about anti-racism, I see the errors and harms in both the posture of expert and in my lack of preparation for diverse settings. So this paper is a response to that. For this paper, I have looked to experts to better prepare me, and this is what I wish I had known when working in community settings. My thesis here is that because designers are no longer limited to corporate settings, and are invited into more spaces to contribute to a greater diversity of topics, we are not well prepared with mindsets needed to work in socially complex settings. To begin to build those skills and awarenesses, I'm drawing from multicultural psychology, particularly Dr. Wing Su's work, feminist methodology as a foundation for critical and careful research methods, post-colonial research, to examine the systems and structures we take for granted. Community-based design practice. I found practical and useful ideas, particularly from Christine Ortiz Guzman's work and the guidebooks by Light and Lucken and Grant and Villalobos. And finally, the design justice movement. They have these commitments and zines that are really helpful, and Sasha Costanza-Schock's recent book, Design Justice, is fantastic. So this paper here introduces a framework of harm and empowerment. I've framed the harms and opportunities along what I see as three core aspects of a design collaboration process. I'll give an overview of those before we dive in. First, the interpersonal aspect of collaborating with community partners. This is about how we respect and care for participants and co-designers throughout the design process on a human level in our daily interactions. Next, interpretation. In any research or creative process, this is how we make sense of and prioritize the information we collect and the insights we generate. Finally, the structure. How we approach projects and work with partners is important. This can be the most difficult to change because these things often feel like they're set in stone or beyond our control, but they are important. So then, if we look at the left side of the framework, these are some of the harms we can enact when we're naive about systems of oppression. Within interpersonal, we should reflect on our beliefs and behaviors around othering, and learn to facilitate in ways that do not rely on the myth of meritocracy. Loudest voices in the room, anyone? And to mitigate the power dynamics that come with being experts and professionals in different settings. And then as our projects make sense of context, they frame the opportunity and reflect on what we heard and prioritize stories, it's important that we do that through the community's lens and not our own. And it can be a habit of design to look at the immediate context to design solutions. But there are larger and influential factors at play when we look at long-term challenges. And design schools don't always give us the critical lenses to see structural biases. So it's up to us to do that work to learn more. And as designers, we may also be tempted to see everything as a problem to be solved. And this mindset can set us up to be very critical of the context, rather than seeking out the things that are working and the strengths of the resilient people. And the last one in this section, when we are uncomfortable or unfamiliar with racism, sexism, class oppression, ageism, ableism, and other oppressions, we can overlook these stories as exaggerated or rare when we hear them. Not necessarily intentionally, but it happens. So the more we learn about these issues, the better able we will be to hear them. Finally, when structuring co-creation projects, we need to be cautious that the goals we set up are not external to the context. They could be defined by our objectives and perspective as designers, rather than necessary and valued by the people that we're working with. And here, abandoning is probably a harsh word, but our timelines are typically shorter and more finite than the community's. So we run the risk of leaving the project before the work is really done. This can mean that the community has given their time and energy and wisdom to us in hopes of achieving something meaningful to them, and we do not follow through on delivering it. But there is hope. On the right side of the framework, we can work in ways that bolster the community, that leverage our skills as listeners, interpreters, visualizers, that create something useful through a process that is enriching for all. The interpersonal skills are primarily about awareness and empathy here. Partners or participants can be seen to have a bad attitude if we don't understand the history of extraction and oppression that precede us as external partners. Research has a bad reputation in many historically marginalized communities for a good reason. Be patient and learn from it. As we work in new areas on topics that are outside of our own lived experiences, it can be uncomfortable for many reasons. We are not adept at the language, we don't have references, we may fear making mistakes, but that's part of the work, to humble ourselves and learn from others. And the last one in this section, we can look for ways to share power, to give opportunities to others to lead and express their skills and advise from their localized knowledge. We can lift others up as they work alongside us. And then, as we interpret stories, our work will be better, more accurate, and more fair if we acknowledge the entire system. We have to look beyond the individual behaviors and immediate context to understand the structures that have created the current situation. And we must remember to center the community in our synthesis, to maintain their voices and their perspectives, to keep the meanings true. Design research has some advantages over other fields in that we do often value individual stories. We do not need to survey the majority to find a story to be inspiring and actionable. And this is especially important for people who have been pushed to the margins. Finally, we can shape more community-oriented and socially valuable projects when we work carefully and closely with partners to define the projects together. Whether it's problems or opportunities or needs. And this last one, which is probably the most difficult for many of us, is to find ways for the work to match the pace and scale of the community, to plan for ways to continue beyond the semester, beyond the current budget. This may take time to build, but it's a worthy goal. So there's a lot more detail about all of this in the paper. I hope this has been a helpful introduction to the main ideas. And I'll conclude with 2 thoughts. It is time that designers embrace and prioritize understanding and acting on structural oppression, because it's a factor in both how we work and what we build. And then my future work, and hopefully yours too, is to see my task as a designer as part of a healthy creative process and the work of fostering deeper, healthier collaborations in many different settings. So, thank you. Please reach out and let me know what you thought of this and the paper. I have a lot more to learn about this work and a lot of big questions ahead of me. So if you have suggestions for things that I've missed or questions about what all this means, I'm open to your feedback, and you can contact me in these ways. Thank you.